The United Nations counter-terrorism chief Vladimir Voronkov is raising alarm that terrorist groups including Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State are spreading across the African continent. Or presenting the Secretary General's latest report on the threats posed by terrorist groups, Voronkov says Al-Qaeda and Islamic State are exploiting the pandemic to regroup. He says the terrorist groups have been adapting to new technologies and moving into some of the world's fragile regions and continue to pose a threat to peace and security globally. Well, the world is reported to be witnessing a rapidly evolving situation in Afghanistan, which could have far-reaching implications around the globe. Voronkov cited Islamic State's expanded presence in that country and pointed out that several members of the Taliban have been designated as terrorists by the Security Council.
And joining us remotely to look at this development is security expert Dr. KABIR ADAMU. Thank you so much, Dr. ADAMU, for joining us on Newsnight.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Well, I suppose you've seen that report, or at least you heard us read it out. How concerning is this? And does this crystallize President Muhammadu Buhari's concerns in that his opinion piece when he says Africa is facing its day of reckoning?
Exactly. You are referring to the letter or the article that was published on the Financial Times by President Buhari. Indeed, it does confirm that, and it confirms the trajectory of reports that have been written over the last few months, indicating clearly that the Sahel region, as well as several other parts of Africa, including Tanzania as an example, Mozambique, are becoming havens for these terrorist groups, and that they, if not checked, could result to serious consequences in terms of governance in those locations. We've seen in Mali already 2 times where the government was changed as a result of the activities of these gunmen, some of them jihadists, others not jihadists. So definitely very concerning. And again, I think it's very timely that President Buhari wrote that article to bring more attention to this issue. What bothers me, however, is that the root causes of the issues, as far as I am concerned, are not even being spoken. Governance, for instance, most of the drivers and the reasons that this group use to recruit and to mobilize issues that have to do with bad governance. And so no matter what the UN speaks, if it does not tackle or address that particular issue of governance, then unfortunately we're going to see an increase in those groups across the sub-region.
All right, Kabir, Voronkov talked about these groups moving into what he called fragile regions and posing a threat to peace and security. Help us understand what he was referring to when he talked about fragile groups, and then how should the world and Africa in particular be treating this trend?
So the Human Development Index in most African countries, especially in the Sahel, are really, really deplorable. And because of that, there are structural gaps, some of them political, some of them economic and social, that unfortunately allow these groups to, as it were, deploy and then expand. And so we've seen a proliferation in the last few years of groups that are affiliated with the 2 major jihadist groups in the world. That's the Islamic State as well as Al-Qaeda. And despite their challenges that they are having in other parts of the world, where in these parts of Africa, especially the Sahel, and to an extent some parts of, like I said, Mozambique, we're seeing them increase in strength, mainly because of this Human Development Index that are really, really deplorable in those countries. And like I said earlier on, these are issues that have to do with governance. Now, these groups capitalize on that, recruit, and then they also capitalize on the inability or the weak institutions in those countries. If I use Niger as an example, given the size of Nigerian border and the fact that it's geolocated within a region where almost all its neighbors have these issues If you look at on the side to Libya, then on the side to Nigeria, and then, in fact, virtually everywhere Niger has that challenge, yet it doesn't have the capacity to protect its borders. And so these are the kind of things that these groups capitalize on. I can talk about the economy, I can talk about socioeconomic grievances, I can talk about women and gender issues that they capitalize on. So many things that they capitalize on that, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, are increasing in parts of Africa.
Okay, very quickly, Dr. KABIR, I just wanted to touch on what we're seeing in recent times in Nigeria, where terrorists are surrendering in droves. Your thoughts with these reports and these concerns raised? The world is watching what is unfolding in Afghanistan. Is it too early to celebrate? And what do you think is responsible? The government has given reasons why we're seeing these successes. But in your opinion, what do you think is happening? Could this be the death of Shekau that we are reaping the fruit of?
Yes, a couple of factors. One of them is the possibility that it's related with the death of Shekau, but not so much as the death of Shekau, but the fact that his death sort of precipitated a kind of conflict between the two major groups that are in the Lake Chad Basin, that is the Islamic State in West Africa province and the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah lil-Dawat wal Jihad that Shekau headed. Now, that conflict led to the death of several of its commanders. So what we saw were a multitude of cells that had no leadership. Now, combine that with the increase in military interdiction attacks that has effectively cut off the supply channels of these groups. So things like fuel, food, name them, all the things they need to survive in their camps were effectively cut off by the military attacks. And so they had camps where their living conditions became extremely difficult. Add that to the fact that their commanders were not available. And then the third factor, which is ISWAP, that was the winning part of the two sides fighting, gave them the option, either you join us or you go back to the Nigerian military. And then they pushed the propaganda, that is, ISWAP pushed that propaganda that if you go back to the Nigerian military, they're going to kill you. But what we saw is that the Nigerian military received them. And then, of course, the result is what we're seeing at the moment. And then more of them started coming out. A couple of concerns, however. Number one concern, they were not coming with their weapons. So the Nigerian military needs to debrief them and find out where those weapons are. Now, there are several reasons why they may not have come with their weapons. One of them is to escape ISWAP, that if they see them with weapons, perhaps could kill them. Another reason is, like, most analysts think, is that they intend to go back to what they were doing before. So that's very worrisome. Number three, which is also extremely concerning, if we don't manage this very well, it has the tendency of course, allowing these groups to, as it were, become regroup, and then they become another movement altogether. Especially that we know that there is a third faction headed by one Bakura that is between the border.
All right, we'll leave it there. KABIR ADAMU, security expert on News 9. Thank you so much, KABIR.